Alright guys, quick disclaimer. The airsoft replica and or parts in this video are not real firearms. And nothing shown works in real firearms either. So don't try it. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. And everything here is strictly for airsoft use. Again, these are airsoft use only. Alright, let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a range test, accuracy test, the difference between the E&L stock Hopup unit versus the Silent Industries TDC, true TDC Hopup. I made a more detailed video review on this Hopup. I'll leave the card for this if you want to check that out up here in the corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a before video. I finally have a run cam where I can show you guys the accuracy difference between the factory Hopup and this guy. I've done this install on the previous E&L, and I did find that the factory nozzle may or may not work with this Hopup because the factory nozzle on this guy is a little bit thick. So if I have to, I will just put this EPS nozzle in there that fits perfectly in this Hopup. Because what I only want to change is the Hopup and the recommend barrel. And we're going to use Airsoft Mutations LC 65 degree Hopup bucking and compare between the two. We're also going to be using 0.32 gram BBs on the before and after to try to keep everything as consistent as possible. So on my run cam, we're going to go to my backyard and shoot at a tree that's 53 yards away, which comes out to be about 160 feet. And the tree is about a couple feet wide. So I feel like that would be a good representation of how the accuracy is going to look like in this thing. And since this has a Picatinny rail, it should work out pretty well. With that being said, let's head on over to the run cam and get our before result.
Okay, so I have to tilt the replica a little bit because of wind. So it's a little trick that I use to combat wind. Anyways, here we go. Alright, full auto.
Alright, so got the Hopup set on this guy for shooting 3.2 gram BBs at the range. So trying to get this as realistic as possible as if we're being used. So that will affect how the Chrono reacts for this baseline. So we're going to do 10 shots in semi and get our average. Okay, so we got 1.46 joules on 3.2 gram BBs at 313 FPS. And if we go over to the other screen, you can see how consistent the FPS is. There's our average. All right, so now we got semi out of the way. Let's do full auto and see what she gets. Okay, and the reason why we're doing this Chrono is to see if the Hopup changes the FPS at all with the combinations that were recommended for this Silent Industries TDC Hopup for the AK. So before I assemble the barrel and Hopup system, if you guys want more detailed information on how the setup goes together and what all is included with the Silent Industries Hopup, leave a card right up here in the corner for a video that I did that was more in-depth detail on how this Hopup works. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get it all assembled and see if I need to swap out nozzles with this E&L. That's also described in the video that I made previous to this one.
5 minutes later.
Well, as like in my other video, the nozzle ended up being too thick. So, got the EPS nozzle in. It's about the same length. So really shouldn't change much at all. The factory one does have an internal O-ring, so shouldn't affect really anything. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and throw this back together using some Wyshtech magic. 1, 2, 3. I did it! Now that we got it all back together, the process wasn't too bad. So we'll head on over to the run cam and see if it shoots any better compared to our baseline that we made early in the video. And stay tuned for later in the video because we're going to be throwing some upgrades after the testing, let's get to it.
Alright, let's see if any changes have been made. Spam semi. Oh yeah, it's very manageable now. Now let's try full auto.
So how about them apples? So I don't know about you guys, but I think the accuracy got a bit better, but I feel like it could still be even better than what you just saw. So with that being said, as I said earlier, we're going to be throwing in some upgrades in this guy. So let me go over what we're throwing in. So first things first, the customer wants this to be at 1.49 joules on 200 grams BBs to pass Chrono. Air volume ratioed and tuned for 3.2s. Parts that are already installed in the gearbox is the EPS 20.7mm nozzle. Of course, as you know, the Silent Industries AK Hopup ended up changing back to the Maple Leafs 60-degree Super Macaron bucking, as the Airsoft Mutations bucking that we had in there was a little bit too sensitive on the dial. And then, of course, the Lambda 601 by 363mm. So going back on the 3.2 gram BBs and the proper air volume ratio, from my last experience with the build just similar to this, I ended up having to do a ported cylinder, and I really like ASG's cylinders for how smooth they are inside, and the port is just in the right spot. We ended up opting for this Retro Arms flat base trigger. I think it's going to be a great addition to this build to complement the looks of it. Then we're going with the Retro Arms piston, 14.5 tooth, Retro Arms silent piston head. This is aluminum. Solinks Advanced Brushless Motor 31K. This has the anti-reversal bearing in it, so we don't need the anti-reversal latch in this build. Of course, the good old Wyshtech 13-1 gear set. I do plan on short stroking the sector gear by 4 teeth for PME prevention, as well as tappet plate timing correction and much faster trigger response. It's going to help keep this replica reliable. We're throwing the Matrix M120 spring in here. I really like these springs because they tend to hold their tension for a long period of time. Haven't had issues with these things with the FPS drop off. The reason why I'm using M120 is because with the thrust bearings of both on the piston head and the spring guide I got here, it's going to preload the spring a little bit to make up that 4-tooth short stroking. And going to the spring guide, speaking of, you'll see that there's some modifications done on both sides. This is actually an APS spring guide, and it seems to fit the best with those lugs taken off, because obviously on the back of the gearbox, going down to 2 lugs, I've tested the Crytek, Arcturus, and some other miscellaneous spring guides, and I find this one to fit the best in here without it moving around like this when it's inside the gearbox. Whereas the OEM one of many things I check every single part. Should barely move around, and a lot of those spring guides, they moved around a lot or they wobbled like this. And speaking of the wobbling like this, I always use these fixation screws, or you can also call them the spring guide holders, and they screw on the back like this. You can find these on my website if you want to get yourself one for your AK build. But they screw in, and their job is they'll squeeze the back end of the gearbox to hold that spring guide from moving around, because if the spring guide moves around and that piston comes back, your piston will slam into the spring guide and you'll have a jam and then PME and break your piston and all that good stuff. This helps prevent that. A lot of manufacturers don't do this. I always do that as a precaution because I never trust spring guides, because I've worked on a lot of AKs and I've had that happen to me, and now I have trust issues. As you've probably already seen, running the Pirun version 3 hybrid on this guy. And as far as bushings go, E&L does solid bushings out of the box. They're okay in my opinion. You don't have to change these out, but this is more my preference. I prefer, since they're 9mm J-caged bearings. These roll very nicely and reduces friction, and they're concentric, very concentric, which means that your gears sit more flat with each other and it makes it run quieter in terms of gear noise. When everything's all done and assembled in this replica, this thing should sound absolutely amazing. You should barely hear the gears, and this thing should be super snappy. And as far as the cylinder head to go, I definitely am replacing that. I'm not a fan of the cylinder heads that are in these E&Ls, and I'll show you why. Good old nozzle wobble. I'm literally moving the cylinder head up and down. Not only that, but the stem of the cylinder head, although decent, could be improved on the nozzle wobble on here. And the reason why this is a big deal, and why am I making it a big deal, is because when you enter the chamber from down below, literally pushing your nozzle upwards, and that's going to cause nozzle misalignment while it's shooting, so you won't get that consistent FPS that you can see a lot of techs do, including myself, get around 1 FPS difference or less. And that's one contributor to that. You definitely want to minimize your nozzle wobble as much as possible. Another thing that reduces your nozzle wobble is the tappet plate that goes in these. If it doesn't grab onto the nozzle very well, it's going to contribute to more nozzle wobble. The tighter that fork that grabs onto the nozzle, the less your nozzle will wobble on that. So I'm going to examine the tappet plate in this gearbox, and we may end up replacing it if I don't like it. So because I want the best possible result out of this, and we may go with the Retro Arms tappet plate because I'm out of the Bull Gear aluminum tappet plates, because those grab onto these like damn near like a clamp, and that's absolutely perfect. But that being said, I'm going to tear open this gearbox and throw all the parts in and show you guys what it looks like.
5 minutes later.
So I ended up changing my mind on the cylinder with the ported and kept the stainless steel factory cylinder because the air volume ratio, once I did all my measuring, the air volume ratio was going to be really low. After some measuring, I found out this full cylinder with the short stroke to the 4 teeth was right about in the sweet spot for 3.2 gram BBs. I did have to cut down the barrel just as a tiny bit to raise that air volume ratio just a little bit more for 3.2s. That way we don't lose any joules when we go from 2.0s to 3.2s. That's the ultimate goal here, is to make this replica as efficient as possible while achieving the customer's expectations. I also ended up keeping the tappet plate, and I trimmed the fin a little bit so that there was about 2.5, 3 teeth remaining before the piston release, and having the tappet plate all the way forward. That way the nozzle can dwell against the bucking for a good 2.5 to 3 teeth before the piston's released. So we should see some very solid FPS results in the Chrono with 3.2 gram BBs. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it all back together and go from there. Well, here it is all together. I gotta say, that trigger, ooh, that looks great on this AK. Damn. And that Hopup though, woo-wee. Now with all that back together, let's throw some 3.2s in this mag and head on over to Chrono and see how she shoots. Okay, so we're going to do 10 shots in semi first on 3.2 gram BBs as displayed here. Joules are going to show up here, then rounds per second right here, and FPS right here. 10 shots, here we go. So we're getting 1.47 joules, which customer did state that needed the joules at or below 1.49. So we're really close, which we're going to leave it at that. So if we go over and check out our FPS consistency, it's pretty damn good. From here down to here, these are how many shots I made. And now let's do a full auto fire. I'm going to do a 2-second round burst. Okay, so we're getting about 30 rounds a second, which I anticipated. FPS consistency is pretty damn good. And here's our average. And we're still clocking in about 1.48 joules. Now, I know some of you are going to ask, what about the semi-auto response? Well, I'm going to spam semi-auto and show you. I'm going to pull the trigger as fast as I can. So here we go. Leave down in the comments what you think of the semi-auto response. It's pretty damn good Chrono if you ask me, and it's certainly doing better than it was stock. So let's go field test this thing and compare it to the before range test that I did earlier in this video.
Okay, this is 11.1, 3.2 gram BBs, semi-auto. Alright, full auto.
So, if there's anything different in this build that you guys would do, let me know down in the comments because I'm curious what you guys would do, and also I'm curious what your opinions are on the run cam footage I did to show off the range and accuracy of this thing, and if there's anything I could do better in that regard. It was really difficult to run the run cam on this rail system. I had to take this off. I even had to shim it upwards a little bit so that the damn thing would aim where this was shooting, especially when I turned up the hop up. So that being said, guys, I really appreciate you watching this video and making it this far, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.